Operation Mongoose. America's secret war against Castro. The war that never happened. Cuba, 1961. Only 90 miles from the coast of Florida, a small island has become the stage for one of the most dangerous games in history. After the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, President John F. Kennedy is furious and humiliated. The CIA promises redemption. But this time, it won't be open warfare. It will be a shadow war, a silent campaign of sabotage, deception, and assassination plots, all designed to bring down one man, Fidel Castro. This was Operation Mongoose, a secret project that turned the Caribbean into a covert battlefield, and brought the world closer than ever to nuclear war. Chapter 1: The Aftermath of Failure, April 1961. The Bay of Pigs invasion has collapsed in disaster. 1,400 Cuban exiles, trained and equipped by the CIA, had stormed the beaches of southern Cuba in hopes of igniting an uprising against Fidel Castro. But within 72 hours, the dream of liberation had turned into a nightmare. The invaders were captured or killed, and the United States, despite trying to hide its role, was exposed before the world as the architect of the operation. Inside the White House, the atmosphere was toxic. President Kennedy felt betrayed by his intelligence services. He had been assured that the invasion would succeed, that the Cuban people would rise up, that America could deny involvement if things went wrong. None of that happened. The world saw the truth, and the Soviet Union saw an opportunity. Castro emerged stronger than ever, a hero of anti-imperialism, backed by Moscow. For Washington, it was a humiliation that had to be erased. Kennedy's inner circle, especially his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, demanded results. If the CIA had failed through direct invasion, then it was time for indirect warfare. Something deniable. Something that could not be traced. In November 1961, the president approved a new top-secret plan, Operation Mongoose. Its purpose? To help Cuba overthrow the communist regime. Its real mission? To remove Castro, by any means necessary. At the heart of the operation stood Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, a veteran of psychological warfare in the Philippines and Vietnam. Lansdale wasn't a spy in the traditional sense. He was a strategist of chaos, a man who believed in winning wars through manipulation, propaganda, and the careful destruction of a nation's confidence. Under his leadership, Operation Mongoose would combine the CIA, the U.S. military, and a network of Cuban exiles, all working in the shadows. The scope was enormous. Sabotage of power plants and sugar refineries. Smuggling of arms to resistance cells. Creation of fake uprisings and rumors of betrayal inside Castro's government. Even psychological operations, spreading superstitions, false prophecies, and staged miracles to undermine faith in the revolution. The project's headquarters was hidden in room 303 of the old Executive Office building in Washington. Every Tuesday, the special group, Augmented, would meet Robert Kennedy, CIA Director John McCone, Lansdale, and a few trusted operatives. They reviewed plans with chilling detachment, exploding cigars, poisoned diving suits, seashell bombs, and chemical weapons meant to make Castro lose his beard and his image of revolutionary strength. While some of these ideas sound absurd today, they reveal something deeper: the desperation and obsession that had gripped the American leadership. Castro was more than just an enemy. He was a symbol of defiance, a reminder that the United States could bleed on its own doorstep. By early 1962, Operation Mongoose was in full motion. Hundreds of agents and informants moved through Cuba and the Caribbean. CIA teams sabotaged warehouses, burned crops, and destroyed shipments. Meanwhile, psychological warfare experts broadcast fake news into Cuban radio networks, trying to convince citizens that the regime was collapsing. But beneath the surface of this covert chaos, something far more dangerous was taking shape, a response from the Soviet Union. For every secret American action, Moscow planned a countermeasure. And before long, both sides would find themselves staring down the barrel of the most terrifying standoff in human history, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Chapter 2: The Shadow War expands. By early 1962, Operation Mongoose was in motion, a campaign of secrecy and sabotage spreading like wildfire across the Caribbean. From the outside, Cuba seemed calm. But beneath the surface, explosions echoed in the sugar fields, ships mysteriously sank at harbor, and foreign radio stations began broadcasting strange, anonymous messages. The United States had opened a new front, not of soldiers and tanks, but of agents, spies, and psychological warfare. At the center of this shadow conflict stood General Edward Lansdale and the CIA's Covert Operations Branch. Their task was simple in theory but impossible in execution: create enough chaos inside Cuba that the people themselves would rise against Castro. Each week, in a small conference room in Washington, the special group, augmented, reviewed dozens of new ideas, most of them illegal, some of them insane. There were plans to spread hallucinogenic gases at public rallies, to make Castro appear deranged in front of his people. Others proposed contaminating his radio studio with chemicals that would cause disorientation during his speeches. One CIA scientist even designed an exploding seashell, intended to be placed where Castro often went diving. Another team developed a poisoned diving suit, laced with a deadly fungus. And when that failed, someone proposed coating Castro's cigars with botulinum toxin. A single puff would be fatal. Behind these absurdities was something deeply serious, a growing obsession in Washington. Robert Kennedy himself demanded a plan that will get results. He pressured Lansdale and the CIA relentlessly, convinced that Castro had to be eliminated before he became a permanent symbol of communist power in the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, in Cuba, Castro's counterintelligence was fighting back with brutal efficiency. His secret police, the G2, infiltrated exile groups in Miami and destroyed underground cells before they could act. Agents posing as defectors fed the CIA false information, leading to failed missions and dead operatives. The island was becoming a fortress, not just physically, but psychologically. The revolution, under siege, was tightening its grip. Still, the CIA pressed on. Small teams of saboteurs landed on Cuban beaches under the cover of night, carrying explosives and radios. Some blew up oil refineries or sugar mills, others vanished without a trace. American spy planes flew high above Havana, snapping photographs of potential targets. In Washington, each new act of destruction was celebrated as progress, even as the risk of exposure grew higher with every mission. As Mongoose expanded, its boundaries blurred. It wasn't just about Cuba anymore. The operation extended into Central America, the Caribbean, and even Europe, a global web of espionage meant to isolate and destabilize Havana's allies. Front companies appeared overnight. Millions of dollars in untraceable funds were funneled through fake charities, cargo firms, and offshore accounts. And yet, no matter how many operations were launched, Castro remained untouchable. He continued his fiery speeches, often mocking the CIA directly. "They will never kill me," he once said, "because I am protected by fate, and by the incompetence of their own agents." But the Americans didn't see it that way. To them, every failure only meant one thing: try harder. And so the missions became bolder and riskier. By mid-1962, new intelligence reports revealed something alarming. Soviet cargo ships were arriving in Cuban ports, carrying mysterious crates and construction materials. At first, the CIA assumed they were defensive weapons, radar systems, perhaps anti-aircraft guns. But as reconnaissance flights continued, analysts began to suspect the unthinkable. nuclear missiles were being installed on the island. Incredibly, while Operation Mongoose was still underway, burning fields, sabotaging factories, plotting assassinations, the United States had unknowingly pushed Cuba straight into the arms of the Soviet Union. The very campaign designed to weaken Castro was instead driving him toward the ultimate protection, a Soviet nuclear shield. As summer turned to fall, tension in Washington reached a breaking point. The Mongoose meetings grew darker, more desperate. The CIA was running out of time and control. Soon, the covert war against Castro would collide with the most dangerous confrontation in human history. The Cuban Missile Crisis was approaching. Chapter 3, 13 Days to Midnight, October 1962. A U-2 spy plane flies high above the Caribbean sky, cutting through thin layers of clouds. Its pilot, Major Richard Heiser, steadies his camera, unaware that the film he is capturing will soon bring the world to the brink of annihilation. Below him, in the Cuban countryside, construction crews are assembling strange, long metallic structures, launch sites. When the photos are analyzed at the CIA's National Photographic Interpretation Center, the truth becomes clear: Soviet nuclear missiles are being deployed in Cuba. The discovery sends shockwaves through Washington. For months, the U.S. government had been running Operation Mongoose, sabotaging and terrorizing Cuba through covert means. But now, that very operation had backfired spectacularly. In response to constant American aggression, Nikita Khrushchev had made his move, placing nuclear weapons just 90 miles from the United States. It was a counterbalance, a message, and a threat all at once. President John F. Kennedy is informed on the morning of October 16. He convenes his most trusted advisors in the cabinet room, the group soon to be known as XCOM. Among them sit Robert Kennedy, CIA Director John McCone, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. On the table lies the impossible question: what now? For 13 days, the United States teeters on the edge of war. The military urges airstrikes to destroy the missile sites. The CIA proposes assassinations and uprisings. The diplomats pled for restraint. Kennedy listens, torn between rage and reason. He knows that one wrong move, one bombing run, one invasion order, could trigger global nuclear war. Meanwhile, Operation Mongoose doesn't stop. Even as the world edges toward Armageddon, CIA teams continue their missions, infiltrating Cuba, sabotaging supply lines, spreading propaganda. They are ghosts in the machine, still following orders written months earlier, unaware that their actions could ignite the very war the president is trying to prevent. Inside Havana, Fidel Castro knows the storm is coming. He orders his forces to full alert and prepares underground bunkers. Soviet advisors, led by General Isa Pliev, coordinate defense plans. The island becomes a fortress, surrounded by anti-aircraft batteries and patrolling MiG fighters. Castro believes the United States is about to invade, and he's ready to fight to the last man. On October 22, Kennedy addresses the world on television. His tone is calm, but his words carry the weight of history. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response. The world holds its breath. The next morning, U.S. Navy ships begin the quarantine, a blockade around Cuba to prevent further Soviet shipments. American destroyers and submarines take their positions. Soviet freighters approach, carrying unknown cargo. In the Atlantic, nuclear-armed submarines lurk, awaiting coded orders. Every man in uniform knows that if someone fires first, for any reason, civilization could end within hours. In Moscow, Khrushchev insists the missiles are purely defensive, but privately, he is alarmed by the ferocity of America's reaction. He had expected outrage, not mobilization. For the first time, he begins to doubt his gamble. During these tense days, Operation Mongoose is effectively suspended, though not officially cancelled. Robert Kennedy tells General Lansdale to stand down all covert actions. The shadow war that had fueled the crisis is now frozen in place, its chaos replaced by silence. In the eyes of history, this pause would save humanity. On October 27, Black Saturday, an American U-2 is shot down over Cuba. The world stands seconds from catastrophe. Kennedy resists pressure from his generals to retaliate. Instead, he authorizes secret negotiations through backchannels. The deal is delicate. The Soviets will remove their missiles from Cuba, and in return, the US will quietly dismantle its nuclear weapons in Turkey. Neither side claims victory, but both step back from the abyss. When the Soviet ships finally turn around, and the missiles begin to be dismantled, the crisis ends. The world exhales. But deep inside the CIA, the outcome is viewed not as relief, but as frustration. To them, Operation Mongoose had failed. Castro still ruled. The revolution had survived. Yet for President Kennedy, the lesson was clear. Covert war and reckless sabotage had brought humanity to the edge of extinction. Operation Mongoose would never truly be the same again. Chapter 4. The CIA's obsession. The Cuban Missile Crisis had ended, but peace was an illusion. To the public, President Kennedy emerged as a hero who had saved the world from nuclear destruction. Yet behind the closed doors of Langley, the Central Intelligence Agency saw something very different: failure. Fidel Castro was still alive. Cuba was still communist. And for many inside the CIA, that was unacceptable. Officially, Operation Mongoose was shut down in 1963. Its files were sealed, its agents reassigned. But in the shadows, a number of senior officers refused to stop. They believed they were fighting not just for US security, but for personal redemption after the humiliation of the Bay of Pigs. They began working off the books, funding new operations through unofficial channels, using exile groups, smugglers, and gangsters. It was no longer a government mission. It was a vendetta. Within these circles, the name Castro became an obsession. CIA operatives like William Harvey, a veteran of covert wars in Europe, and David Morales, chief of the CIA's Miami station known as JM Wave, began planning what they called plausible deniability actions, operations that could never be traced back to Washington. They collaborated with mafia figures, including Sam Giancana, Johnny Roselli, and Santo Trafficante Jr., who had once run Havana's casinos before the revolution. The logic was simple. The mob wanted revenge, and the CIA needed deniable assets. Together, they built one of the strangest alliances in Cold War history: spies and gangsters united by a single goal: to kill Fidel Castro. The assassination attempts that followed were as creative as they were desperate. There was a poisoned milkshake plan, prepared by a Cuban waiter at the Havana Hilton. A toxic pen disguised as a writing instrument for a contact inside Castro's circle. A sniper team hidden on a rooftop during one of his public parades. Each time, something went wrong. The poison failed, the weapon jammed, or the informant betrayed them. The CIA's own files, declassified decades later, read like a dark comedy of errors. But behind the absurdity was a dangerous truth: the US intelligence community had lost its restraint. The line between strategy and obsession had vanished. Meanwhile, in Washington, Kennedy was growing uneasy. He had authorized covert action against Cuba, yes, but not this level of lawlessness. He began distancing himself from the agency, cutting their budgets, firing senior officials, and considering a full reorganization of the intelligence system. Some in the CIA saw this as betrayal. Others saw it as a threat. When President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas in November 1963, the shock paralyzed the nation. And though no direct evidence ever linked the CIA or Operation Mongoose to that event, rumors spread like wildfire. Why had so many figures from Mongoose, the same operatives who had plotted to kill Castro, appeared again in the background of the investigations? Why did some of the same mafia contacts show up in classified files connected to Dallas? The truth remains murky, but one thing is certain. Operation Mongoose had changed the agency forever. It had blurred moral lines and planted seeds of distrust between the CIA, the White House, and the American people. In the years that followed, the campaign against Castro evolved into something darker. New code names appeared. Operation ZR, Rifle. Operation AM, Lash. Each one an echo of the same obsession, the same unending goal. Hundreds of plots, countless failed missions, and a legacy of secrecy that stretched well beyond the Cold War. For Castro, the survival itself became propaganda. He turned every failed assassination into a victory speech. He claimed, often with dark humor, that the CIA had tried to kill him over 600 times, and each time, he said, they failed because I was born under a lucky star. By the late 1960s, the U.S. intelligence community had moved on to new theaters, Vietnam, Laos, Latin America, but the ghost of Mongoose lingered. Its operations had proven that covert warfare could shape history, not through open battle, but through deception, sabotage, and manipulation. It was a blueprint, one that future generations of spies would follow in Iran, Chile, and beyond. The shadow war against Castro had failed in its objective. But in another sense, it had succeeded. It had shown the United States how far it was willing to go, and how easy it was to lose itself in the darkness. Chapter 5: The Legacy of Mongoose. By the end of the 1960s, the files of Operation Mongoose were buried deep in the archives of the CIA, stamped, top secret, sealed, and forgotten. But its consequences would echo through history for decades. What began as a desperate attempt to remove Fidel Castro had evolved into something much larger, a blueprint for covert warfare. For the first time, the United States had experimented with combining espionage, sabotage, and psychological operations on a massive scale, all under the illusion of deniability. And while the operation had failed in its immediate goal, its methods would become a template for future interventions across the globe. In Latin America, CIA-backed coups followed the Mongoose model: manipulation of local groups, propaganda campaigns, and covert funding disguised as civil aid. From Chile in 1973 to Nicaragua in the 1980s, the fingerprints of Mongoose could be seen, the same tactics, refined and expanded. The shadow war had gone global. Inside the agency, however, the cost was heavy. The moral boundaries that once guided intelligence work had been shattered. Young officers trained in the post-Mongoose era grew up believing that covert action, no matter how extreme, was a legitimate instrument of national policy. The lines between defense and offense, between intelligence and interference, blurred until they nearly disappeared. For Fidel Castro, Operation Mongoose became part of his legend. He used it as proof of American aggression, portraying himself as the lone revolutionary defying an empire. Every plot that failed, every bomb that didn't explode, every assassin that never fired, strengthened his image. Ironically, the CIA had helped to create the very myth it sought to destroy. When Castro later spoke of the hundreds of attempts on his life, he laughed. "If surviving so many plots is not a miracle," he said, "then perhaps I am simply immortal." Meanwhile, within the United States, the existence of Operation Mongoose remained hidden from the public for years. It wasn't until the 1970s, when the Church Committee investigated CIA misconduct, that the world learned the full extent of what had happened. The hearings revealed shocking details: sabotage missions, poison plots, partnerships with the mafia, and even proposals to stage fake terrorist attacks to justify invasion. For the American people, it was a revelation and a reckoning. Congress imposed new rules, creating oversight committees to limit the CIA's power. But the damage to the agency's reputation was irreversible. From that moment on, a shadow of doubt would hang over every secret mission, every classified file, every denial from Washington. Still, the lessons of Mongoose were never fully learned. The temptation of secrecy, the belief that a small group of men could shape the world from the shadows, remained irresistible. Even as new generations of leaders came and went, the ghosts of the past lingered in policy rooms and intelligence briefings. The mindset that created Operation Mongoose had not died. It had simply evolved. Today, historians view Mongoose as a warning, a story of how paranoia and power can feed each other until reality itself becomes blurred. It reminds us that every secret war, no matter how well-intentioned, leaves behind consequences that outlive its creators. And perhaps most haunting of all, in trying to destroy an enemy, a nation can end up transforming itself. Operation Mongoose was never officially declared, never publicly debated, and never truly ended. It began as an act of revenge, and ended as a mirror reflecting America's own fears. Its legacy lies not in Cuba's jungles or Havana's alleys, but in the mindset it created, the belief that in the name of security, anything could be justified. The world survived the Cold War. But the lessons of that secret battle still whisper in the halls of power today. Because once a nation learns to fight in the shadows, it rarely returns to the light.